In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes, the order Abercast. We are the brave and bold.
The Abercast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. Violence.
Your body is your temple, so let's make sure you got a badass t-shirt on it. Variety of cool occult themed t-shirts. And other merch like stickers, wall art, mugs, and more. Visit the storefront on Advertise.com.
All right, welcome to the Abercast. This is John. We are doing Liber 4 Mysticism Part 2. We're going to be covering a lot of ground tonight. I'm just going to get started. Before we get going, I want to remind everyone to rate and review on iTunes, hit the website, find the social media links, find me, sign up to the newsletter, links in the show notes, and Patreon. If this has been migrated off Patreon, then I would like to remind everybody on the mainstream to check out the Patreon account. Okay, so just to catch everybody up, the first episode of Liber 4 Mysticism Part 1 was all the what did he call it? Preliminary remarks, where he let some really interesting stuff out. But now we're actually going to get into it. So this is Chapter 1, Mysticism, Asana. I want to, before we get started into this one, I'll let everybody know I am not a practitioner of yoga. I don't know particularly a lot. I'm certainly not an expert on Hindi culture. So it's totally possible. I'm going to do my best, but it's totally possible that I'm going to be butchering some words this evening for the rest of the series, probably. So there's the apology up front for the whole series. Chapter 1, Mysticism, Asana. The problem before he starts with just this brilliant idea. The problem before us may be stated thus simply: a man wishes to control his mind, to be able to think to be able to think one chosen thought for as long as he will without interruption. As previously remarked, the first difficulty arises from the body, which keeps on asserting its presence by causing its victim to, you're a victim of your body. It causes its victim to itch, and in other ways to be distracted, and he wants to stretch and scratch and sneeze, and the nuisance is so persistent that the Hindus devised a special practice for quieting it. The word asana means posture, but as with all words which we have caused debate, its exact meaning has altered, and it is used in several distinct sentences by various authors. The greatest authority on yoga is Patanjali, and he says, Asana is that which is firm and pleasant, not unlike a rear end. This may be taken as meaning the result of success in the practice. Again, Sankhya says, posture is that which is steady and easy. And again, any posture which is steady and easy is an asana. There is no other rule by posture will do. Any posture will do. In a sense, this is true because any posture becomes uncomfortable sooner or later. The steadiness and easiness mark definite attainment, as will be explained later on. Hindu books such as the Shava Sanhita give countless postures, many, perhaps most of them, impossible for the average adult European. Others insist that the head, neck, and spine should be kept vertical and straight for reasons connected with the subject of prana, which will be dealt with in its proper place. They go, Crowley and the two ladies that are writing this book, Mary Desti and Leela Waddell, offer for yoga positions. The first one is sit in a chair, head up, back straight, knees together, hands on knees and eyes closed. This is called the God. Kneel, buttocks resting on the heels, toes turned back, back and head straight and hands on thighs. This is called the dragon. So those are two pretty interesting postures to be in, for an extended amount of time. We're going to talk a lot. We're going to get into how long he says you should do these things while you're practicing. But the next two, especially the last one, gets pretty crazy. Okay, so the third one, stand and hold left ankle with right hand, and alternately practice the right ankle and the left hand, etc. Free forefinger on the lips. This is called the ibis. And here is the one that, if I'm going to try any of these, this is the one that's going to break me. Sit. Left heel pressing up anus. Right foot poised on its toes. The heel covering the phallus. Arms stretched out over the knees and head and back straight. This one's called the Thunderbolt. To me, it's like checking your own oil, if you know what I mean. An extreme of asana is practiced by those yogis who remain in one position without moving, except in the case of absolute necessity, during their whole lives. One should not criticize such persons without a thorough knowledge of the subject, and such knowledge has not yet been published. However, one may safely assert that since the great men previously mentioned, this is Jesus and Buddha and Mohammed and Peter, did not do this, it will not be necessary for their followers. Let us then choose a suitable position and consider what happens. There is a sort of happy medium between rigidity and limpness. The muscles are not to be strained, and yet they are not allowed to be altogether slack. It is difficult to find a good descriptive word. Braced is perhaps the best. A sense of physical alertness is desired. Think of a tiger about to spring, or of the oarsman waiting for the gun. After a little, there will be cramp and fatigue, and the student must now set his teeth and go through with it. The minor sensations of itching, etc., will be found to pass away if they are resolutely neglected. But the cramp and fatigue may be expected to increase until the end of the practice. One may begin with a half an hour or an hour, and the student must not mind if the process of quitting the asana involves several minutes of the acutest agony. It will require a good deal of determination to persist day after day, for in most cases it will be found that the discomfort and pain, instead of diminishing, tend to increase. On the other hand, if the student pay no attention, fail to watch the body, an opposite phenomenon may occur. He shifts to ease himself without knowing what he has done to avoid this position, choose a position which naturally is rather cramped and awkward, and in which slight changes are not sufficient to bring ease. Otherwise, for this first few days, the student may even imagine that he has conquered the position. In fact, in all these practices, its apparent simplicity and such that the beginner is likely to wonder what all the fuss is about, perhaps to think that he is specially gifted. Similarly, a man who has never touched a golf club will take his umbrella and carelessly hole a putt, which would frighten the best putter alive. In a few days, however, in all cases, the discomfort will begin, and soon as you go on, they will begin earlier in the course of the hours exercised. The disinclination to practice at all may become almost unconquerable. One must warn the student against imagining that some other position would be easier to master, that one he has selected. Once you begin to change about, you are lost. Perhaps the reward is not far distant. It will happen one day, and the pain is suddenly forgotten. The fact of the presence of the body is forgotten, and one will realize that during the whole of one's previous life, the body has always on the borderland of conscious that has consciousness, a consciousness of pain. And at this moment, one will further realize with an indescribable feeling of relief that not only is this position, which has been so painful at the very idea of physical comfort, but that all other conceivable positions of the body are uncomfortable. This feeling represents success. There will be no further difficulty in the practice. One will get into one's asana with almost the same feeling as that which a tired man gets into a hot bath, and while he is in that position, the body may be trusted to send him no message that might disturb his mind. Other results of this practice are described by Hindu authors, but they do not concern the present. Our first obstacle has been removed, and we can continue with the others. Wrong pen. I'm surrounded by fucking pens. I always grab the wrong one. Chapter 2. The Pranayama and its parallel in speech, the Mantra Yoga. The connection between breath and mind will be fully discussed in speaking of the magic sword, but it may be useful to premise a few details of a practical character. You may consult various Hindu manuals and the writings of Kwang-zi for various notable theories as to method and result. But in this skeptical system, one is better content one's self with the statements which are not worth the trouble of doubting. The ultimate idea of meditation being to still the mind. And it may be considered a useful preliminary to still consciousness of all of the functions of the body. This has been dealt with in the chapter on Asana. One may, however, mention that some yogis carry it to the point of trying to stop the beating heart. Whether this be desirable or no, it would be useless to a beginner, so he will endeavor to make the breathing very slow and regular. The best way to time breathing once some little skill has been acquired with a watch to bear witness is by the use of a mantra. The mantra the mantra acts on the thoughts very much as a pranayama does upon the breath. The thought is bound down to a recurring cycle. Any intruding thoughts are thrown off by the mantra. Just as pieces of putty would be from a flywheel, and the swifter the wheel, the more difficult would it be for anything to stick. This is the proper way to practice a mantra. Utter it loudly and slowly as possible 10 times. Then, not quite so loudly and a very little faster 10 more times. Continue this process until there is nothing but a rapid movement of the lips. This movement should be continued with increased velocity and diminishing intensity until the mental muttering completely absorbs the physical. The student is by this time absolutely still, and the mantra racing in his brain should, however, continue to speed up until he reaches his limit, at which he should continue for as long as possible, but then cease the practice by reversing the process above described. Any sentence may be used as a mantra. And possibly the Hindus are correct in thinking that there is a particular sentence best suited to any particular man. Some men might find the liquid mantras of the Quran slide too easily, so that it would be possible to continue another train of thought without disturbing the mantra. One is supposed, while they are saying the mantra, to meditate upon its meaning, and suggests that the student might construct for himself a mantra which should represent the universe in sound as the pentangle should do in form. Occasionally, a mantra may be given, i.e., heard in some unexplained manner during a meditation. For one man, for example, uses the words, "and strive to see in everything the will of God." To another, while engaging in killing thoughts, came the words, "and push it down," apparently referring to the action of inhibitory centers which he was using. By keeping with this, he got his, quote, "result," unquote. The idea or the ideal mantra should be rhythmical. One might even say musical, but there should be sufficient emphasis on some syllables to assist the faculty of attention. The best mantras are of medium length. So far as the beginner is concerned, if the mantra is too long, one is apt to forget it, unless one practices very hard for a great length of time. On the other hand, mantras of a single syllable, such as Om, are rather jerky, and the rhythmical idea is lost. Here are a few useful mantras. Hold on, I gotta get my shit together. Om. Om is the sound produced by breathing forcibly from the back of the throat and gradually closing the mouth. The three sounds represent the creative, preservative, and destructive principles. There are many more points about this, enough to fill volumes. 2. Om Tat Sat Om. It means, "Oh, that existent O," an aspiration after reality and truth. 3. Om Mani Padme Hum. Oh, the jewel of the lotus, Amen. This refers to Buddha and our old friend Hippocrates, but it is also the symbol of the rosy cross. 4. Om Shivana Vashi. This gives the cycle of creation, peace manifesting as power and power dissolving in peace. Is it just one word? Hold on. Allah. Allah. Is that it? God. It adds 6 to the sum of the first 11 numbers. All right, 6. Hua azu alzai lalaha ili hua. He is God, and there is no other God than he. All right, now, so it gets more difficult. They become longer at this point. The famous Gayatara. Om Tat Savitar Varanium Baharago. Devasya Dimaiha. Dahayo Yona Paratai Odayat. Oh, let us strictly meditate on the adorable light of the divine Savitari. That's the interior sun, and may she enlighten our minds. 8. Kolol Hua. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to Kual twice. Kual Hua Alhua Akkad. Alu Asamed. I am Yed Walham Yulad Waham Yuka Lahu Kufwan Akkad. And that means he is God alone, God the external, and he begets not, and is not begotten, nor is there like unto him anyone. All right, here's the last one. This mantra is the holiest of all there are or can be. It is from the stele of revealing. Akadua, tufu binu, ba chifu, du nu nur fu nutra. Unity utmost showed, I adore the might of thy breath, supreme and terrible God, who makes the gods and death to tremble before thee. I adore thee. Such are enough for this selection. There are many other mantras. Shri Sabapate Swami gives a particular one for each of the chakras. But let the student select one mantra and master it thoroughly. You have not even begun to master a mantra until it continues unbroken through sleep. This is much easier than it sounds. Some schools advocate practicing a mantra with the aid of an instrumental music and dancing. Certainly, very remarkable effects are obtained in the way of magic powers. Whether great spiritual results are equally common is a doubtful point. Persons wishing to study them may remember that the Sahara Desert was within 3 days of London, and no doubt the Sidi Aswaya would be glad to accept pupils. The discussion of the parallel science of the mantra yoga has led us far indeed from the subject of the Pranayama. Pranayama is notably useful in quieting the emotions and appetites, and whether by reason of mechanical pressure which it asserts, or by the thorough combustion which it assures the lungs, it seems to be admirable from the standpoint of health. Digestive troubles are particular ones, very easy to remove in this way. It purifies both the body and the lower functions of the mind. And should be practiced certainly never less than 1 hour daily by the serious student. 4 hours is a better period. The golden mean, 16 hours, is too much for most people. Chapter 3, the Yama. Footnote, Yama means literally control. It is dealt with in detail of part 2, the wand. And, so it's Yama and Niyama. The Hindus have placed these two attainments in the forefront of their program. There are the moral qualities and good works, which are supposed to predispose to mental calm. Yama consists of non-killing, truthfulness, non-stealing, continence, and non-receiving of any gift. In the Buddhist system, sila, or virtue, is similarly enjoyed. The qualities are, for the layman, these 5. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not commit adultery. And thou shalt drink no intoxicating drink. For the monk, many others are added. The commandments of Moses are familiar to all. They are rather similar, and so are those given by Christ. Some of these are only the virtues of a slave invented by his master to keep him in order. The real point of the Hindu Yama is that breaking of any of these would tend to excite the mind. Subsequent theologians have tried to improve upon the teachings of the masters and have given a sort of mystical importance to these virtues, but have insisted upon them only for their own sake and turned them into Puritanism and formalism. Thus, non-killing, which originally meant do not excite yourself by stalking tigers, have been interpreted to mean that it is a crime to drink water that has not been strained, lest you should kill the animalcula. I think he's talking about bacteria or just the little animals that live in the water. But this constant worry, this fear of killing anything by mischance is on the whole worse than hand-to-hand conflict with a grizzly bear. If the barking of a dog disturbs your meditation, it is simplest to shoot the dog and think no more of it. Similarly difficult with wives has caused some masters to recommend celibacy. In all of these questions, common sense must be the guide. No fixed rule can be laid down. The non-receiving of gifts, for example, is rather important for a Hindu who would be thoroughly upset for 2 weeks if anyone gave him a coconut. But the average European takes things as they come by all the time. That he has been put into long trousers. The only difficult question is that of continence, which is complicated by many considerations, such as that of energy. Everybody's mind is hopelessly muddled on the subject, which some people confuse with erotology and some people with sociology. There will be no clear thinking on this matter until it is understood as being solely a branch of athletics. We may then dismiss Yama and Niyama with this advice. Let the student decide for himself what form of life, what moral code will least tend to excite his mind. By once he has formulated it, let him stick to it, avoiding opportunism, and let him be very careful to take no credit for what he does or refrains from doing. It is purely practical code of no value in itself. The cleanliness which assists the surgeon in his work would prevent the engineer from doing this at all. Remember that for the purpose of this treatise, the whole object of Yama and Niyama is to live so that no emotion or passion disturbs the mind.
you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Advertise.com. Find more episodes on this topic. Sign up for the mailing list for bonus content. Get access to the show archive. And visit the storefront for tarot cards, merch, and books. Learn more at Advertise.com.
Chapter 4, the Pratyahara. Pratyahara is the first process, the mental part of our task. The previous practices, Asana, Pranayama, Yama, and Niyama, are all acts of the body, while mantra is connected with speech. Pratyahara is purely mental. And what is Pratyahara? I have a problem with that word. I have a problem getting around it. I have a problem with it. I'm not going to start a fist fight with this word if I see it out on the streets. The word is used by different authors in different senses. The same word is employed to designate both practice and result. It means, for our present purpose, a process rather strategical than practical. Strategical. It is an introspection of sort of general examination of the contents of the mind, which we wish to control. Asana having been mastered, all immediate, exciting causes have been removed, and we are free to think what we are thinking about. A very similar experience to that of Asana is in store for us. At first, we shall very likely flatter ourselves that our minds are pretty calm. This is a defect of observation. Just as the European standing for the first time on the edge of the desert will see nothing there, while his Arab can tell him the family history of each of the 50 persons in view because he has learnt how to look. So within the practice, his thoughts will become more numerous and more insistent. As soon as the body was accurately observed, it was found to be terribly restless and painful. Now that we observe the mind, it is seen to be more restless and painful still. The similar curve might be plotted for the real and apparent painfulness of Asana. Conscious of this fact, we begin to try to control it. Not quite so many thoughts, please. Don't think quite so fast, please. No more of that kind of thought, please. It is only then that we discover that we thought was a school of playful purposes is really the convolutions of the sea serpent. The attempt to repress has the effect of exciting. When the unsuspecting pupil first approaches his holy but wily guru and demands magical powers, that wise one replies that he will confer them, points out that with such caution and secrecy some particular spot on the pupil's body which has never previously attracted his attention, and says, in order to obtain this magical power which you seek, all that is necessary is that you wash 7 times in the Ganges during 7 days, this being particularly careful to avoid thinking of this one spot. Of course, the unhappy youth spends a disgusted week thinking of little else. You must purify your body in the waters of Lake Minnetonka. It is positively amazing with what persistence of thought, even a whole train of thoughts, returns again and again to the charge. It becomes a positive nightmare. It is intensely annoying to find that one does not become conscious that one has gone on to the forbidden subject until one has gone right through it. However, one continues day after day investigating thoughts, trying to check them, and sooner or later one proceeds to the next stage, Daharana, in an attempt to restrain the mind to a single object. Before we go on to this, however, we must consider what is meant by success in Pratyahara. Pratyahara. This is very extensive subject, and different authors take widely divergent views. One writer means an analysis so acute that even though it is resolved into a number of elements, others have taken the view that success is in the practice, is something like an experience which Sir Humphrey Davy had as a result of taking nitrous oxide, to which he exclaimed, "The universe is composed exclusively of ideas." Others say that this gives Hamlet's feeling there is nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so, interpreted as literally was done by Mrs. Edie. However, the main point is to acquire some sort of inhibitory power over these thoughts. Unfortunately, fortunately, there is an unfailing method of acquiring this power. It is given in Liber 3. Sections 1 and 2 are practiced, if necessary, with the assistance of another person to aid your vigilance. You will soon be the master of the final section. It's interesting. People, you guys that's listened to the show for a while, you know that I did Liber 3, and it did break me of a couple bad habits. And if you go on Instagram, you will see I have the scars to prove it. Not to prove that I broke the bad habits, but to prove that I did the teachings of Liber 3. In some people, this inhibitory power may flow suddenly in a very much the same way as occurred in Asana, quite without any relaxation of vigilance. The mind will suddenly be stilled. There will be a marvelous feeling of peace and rest, quite different from the lethargic feeling which is produced by overeating. It is difficult to say whether the definitive or the definite a result would come to all, or even to most people. The matter is one of very great importance. If you have acquired the power of checking the rise of thought, you may proceed to the next stage. Chapter 5, Daharana. Now that we have learnt to observe the mind so that we know how it works, to some extent, and have begun to understand the elements of control, we may try the result of gathering together all of the powers of the mind and attempting to focus them on a single point. We know this is fairly easy for the ordinary educated mind to think without much distraction on a subject in which he is interested. We have the popular phrase revolving a thing in their mind. And as long as the subject is sufficiently complex, as long as the thoughts pass freely, there is no great difficulty, so long as a gyroscope is in motion and it remains motionless relatively to its support and even resists attempts to distract it. When it stops, it falls from that position. If the earth ceased to spin around the sun, it would at once fall into the sun. That moment, then, the students take a simple subject rather than a simple object, and imagines it or visualizes it. He will find that it is not so much his creature as he supposed. Other thoughts will invade his mind, so that the object is altogether forgotten, perhaps for whole minutes at a time, and at other times the object itself will begin to play all sorts of tricks. Suppose you have chosen a white cross. It will move its bar up and down. It'll elongate the bar. It'll turn the bar oblique and the arms unequal, turn upside down, grow branches, get a crack around it, or figure upon it, change its shape altogether like an amoeba, change its size and distance as a whole, change the degree of its illumination, and at the same time, it'll change its color. It will get splotchy and blotchy. It'll grow patterns, rise and fall, and twist and turn. Clouds will pass over its face. There is no conceivable change of which is incapable. Not to mention its total disappearance and replacement by something altogether different. Anyone to whom this experience does not occur need not imagine that he is meditating. It shows merely that he is incapable of concentrating his mind in the very smallest degree. Perhaps a student may go for several days before discovering that he is not meditating. When he does, the obscensity of the object will infuriate him, and it is only now that his real troubles begin. Only now that will comes really into play. Only now that his manhood is tested. If it were not for this will development, which he got to conquest of Asana, he will probably give up, as it is a mere physical agony which he underwent. It is the verest trifle compared with the horrible tedium of Daharana. For the first week, it may seem rather amusing, and you may even imagine that you are progressing. But as the practice teaches you what you are doing, you will apparently get worse and worse. Please understand that in doing this practice, you are supposed to be seated in asana. And to have your notebook and your pencil by your side and watch in front of you. You are not to practice at first for more than 10 minutes at a time, so to avoid risk of overtiring the brain. In fact, if you will probably find the whole of your willpower is not equal to keeping to a subject at all for so long as 3 minutes, or even apparently concentrating on it for so long as 3 seconds. The 3/5 of 1 second by keeping to it at all is meant by mere attempt to keep to it. The mind becomes fatigued and the object so incredibly loathsome that it is useless to continue for the time being. If Frater Pre's record, we find that after daily practice for 6 months, meditation of 4 minutes and less are still being recorded. The student is supposed to count the number of times that his thought wanders. This he can do by his fingers or on a string of beads. If these breaks seem to become more frequent instead of less frequent, the student must not be discouraged. It is partially caused by his increased accuracy of observation. It is exactly the same way the introduction of vaccinations resulted in apparent increase in the number of cases of smallpox. The reason being is that people began to tell the truth about the disease instead of faking. Soon, however, control will improve faster than observation. When this occurs, the improvement will become apparent in the record. Any variation will probably be due to accidental circumstances. For example, one night you may enter very tired when you start. Other nights you may have a headache or indigestion. You will do well to avoid practicing at such times. We will suppose then that you have not reached the stage when your average practice on one subject is about a half an hour, and the average number of breaks between 10 and 20. Then you would suppose that this implied that during these periods between the breaks, one was really concentrated. But this is not the case. The mind is flickering all throughout, or although imperceptibly. However, there may be sufficient real steadiness, even at the early stage, to cause some very striking phenomenon, of which the most marked is one. Will possibly make you think that you have gone to sleep. Or it may seem quite inexplicable, in that any case will disgust you with yourself. You will completely forget who you are and who you are, what you are, and what you are doing. A similar phenomenon sometimes happens when one is half awake in the morning and one cannot think. What town one is living in. Similarly, of these two things are rather significant. It suggests that what is really happening is that you are waking up from a sleep which men call waking, the sleep whose dreams are life. There is another way to test one's progress in this practice, and that is by the character of the breaks. Breaks are classified as follows. Firstly, physical sensations. These could have been overcome by asana. Secondly, breaks that seem to be dictated by events immediately preceding the meditation. Their activity becomes tremendous. One, by this practice, does not understand how much is really observed by the senses, or the sense without the mind becoming conscious of it. Thirdly, there is a class of breaks partaking in the nature of reverie or daydreams. These are very insidious. One may go on for a long time without realizing that one is wandering at all. Fourthly, we get a very high class of breaks, which is sort of an aberration of the control itself. You think, how well am I doing it? Or perhaps it would be rather a good idea if you were on a desert island, or if you were in a soundproof house, or if you were sitting by a waterfall. But these are only trifling variations of the vigilance itself. The fifth class of breaks seem to have no discoverable source in the mind. Such may even take the form of an actual hallucination, usually auditory. Of course, such hallucinations are infrequent and are recognized for what they are. Otherwise, the student had better see his doctor. The usual kind consists of an odd sentence or fragments of sentences which are heard quite distinctly in a recognizable human voice, not the student's own voice, or that of anyone he knows. A similar phenomenon is observed by wireless operators who call such messages atmospherics. And there is a further kind of break, one which is desired result itself. It must be dealt with later in detail. Now there are real sequence in these classes of breaks. The control improves, the percentage of primaries and secondaries will diminish, even though the total number of breaks in a meditation remains stationary. By the time you are meditating 2 or 3 hours a day, and filling up most of the rest of the day with other practices designed to assist when nearly every time something or other happens and there is constantly a feeling of being on the brink of something pretty big, one might expect to proceed to the next state. Dharana. We're going to wait for Dharana for tomorrow. We're going to get into that tomorrow. This has been Liber 4, Manifestation, Part 2. I'm John Towers. This is the Abercast, and you guys feel free to rate and review on iTunes. Feel free to please sign into the newsletter. Links all in the show notes. Go to the website, find my social media accounts, hit me up. And then if this is on the mainstream somewhere, then feel free to check out Patreon and think about that. This is originally a Patreon episode, but I don't feel like re-recording all this shit when I post it up, so I just do it now. And this is Soda Jerk, Fuck and Fight.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books at apricast.com.